So Joe Rogan is moving to Spotify, off of YouTube, off of Apple Podcasts and things like that. And it has a feel of like Howard Stern moving to Sirius satellite radio or something like that, like an exclusive brand, meshing or something. And I want to do a quick breakdown because Joe Rogan, his podcast, the JRE, has influenced me a lot. A lot of the intellectuals that I have kind of responded to and helped guide my education and stuff like that, and the way I teach have come from his podcast. It's a really excellent source, and I mention it as far as a great source for media. I love martial arts, so that's part of it. So let's break down what is the big deal about Joe Rogan and why is he so influential? Why is he so popular? He's like the male equivalent of Oprah. But there's a lot of crossover and a lot of women listen to JRE. So I think, when we have to understand what is it about the Joe Rogan podcast that makes it, number one, or 200 million downloads and views per month, 200 million? I mean, that's far more than any cable news or anything like that. And it's a weird thing because Joe is both mainstream in that he is incredibly famous and popular, and yet is still not mainstream and isn't really talked about or discussed in the mainstream. It's an interesting kind of mix, but just one mention, if he just mentions you on his show, you trend number one on Google. I mean, that's a lot of power for one person to have, that if he just mentions you, you instantly, your business or your life can change that fast just from a mention from him. It's partially about him and who he is, but also partially about the podcast. The podcast is the long form interview. And that is something that we need in society right now. It's something that a lot of people are trying to mimic, is not these short soundbite type of things, but just a long form interview. And it's with people that he wants to talk to. It's not with the most famous people, but he'll have famous people on. He'll have Robert Downey Jr. on, but it's because he's interested in talking to him about what it's like to be Robert Downey Jr. or talk about martial arts or talk about movies that he did that he thought were funny, like Tropic Thunder or something like that. He wants to talk, and it's very authentic. He wants to know what you're thinking and things like that, and he has 3 hours or an hour or 5 hours to do that. He's just curious, and he's an open-minded dude. He's not, necessarily very intellectual in the common way that we define intellectual, but he's extremely curious. And like Einstein said, I'm nothing special, just passionately curious. The JRE is his world, and now he has this big warehouse where he does it, but it's really his world. It's almost like if you were a writer, director, producer, and did the score and acted in a movie. Like, it's like your thing, or like these musicians, like, I don't know, like Beck or someone like that, who like mixes it all, plays all the instruments, puts it all together or something like that. That's how the JRE is. It's his world. And, I'm a car guy, and I love, my favorite car of all time is the McLaren F1 because it's Gordon Murray. It's one person's vision into this car. And the JRE is that. It's his vision about what is entertaining, what is cool, what is it all about, what do you want to talk about, all of that kind of stuff. And he is a stand-up comedian, so he's able to keep a 3-hour conversation interesting. He's been doing stand-up comedy for 30 years. And in doing that, you become quite good at maintaining the attention of an audience, because you have to get up in front of them and you got to entertain. So he's good at keeping it going. There are a lot of long form podcasts that are dull. Even people that I really admire, their podcasts just aren't as good as when they're on Joe, because Joe Rogan's show, he's a comedian. He knows how to keep it going. So his show is extremely popular, and that's what's moving to Spotify. But what about him as a person? He said one time that really struck with me. He said, "What's the point of getting FU money if you don't say FU?" And when he got Fear Factor, he was paid to the point where he didn't have to worry about money anymore. And when you have that, he saw it as, now I can just do whatever I love to do. So he is one of the most influential human beings on the planet now. Crazy. And he still does commentary for the UFC because he loves it. He loves bow hunting. He loves martial arts. He loves fighting. He loves comedy. That's what he talks about. And there's something really sincere in that. There's something very honest in that we know who he is, and that makes him trustworthy, and therefore people want to listen to someone that they trust, that they know, that they feel like is self-aware and knows who they are, and they can connect with that. And it's something that people admire. Self-awareness is a big part of being a comedian, and he is very self-aware. He makes fun of himself. He knows his good traits and bad traits. He's experimented with psychedelics, and he's a big pot smoker and all that kind of stuff, which all helps with self-awareness and making you humble and all of that kind of stuff. He lives a very intentional life. People admire the fact that he has cars, but he doesn't buy a car just because of like its flash. He buys it because he genuinely likes the engineering of it or something like that. Like even the cars that he has, it's very specific. Like his Corvette is very specific, and his Porsche is very specific. He knows the company that made it, and he knows the people that made it. His bow, he invests money in like bow hunting because the specific bows that he uses are very specific. All that kind of stuff. It's not just getting something just for the hell of it. It's very, very intentional. And that makes him a reliable person. You know, I'm wearing an On It shirt. Aubrey Marcus started On It with Joe Rogan in mind and made Alpha Brain to get Joe Rogan on board because he knew that that was a valuable person. Aubrey saw in Joe Rogan, he saw a lot of potential and said, this is someone that, you know, can really guide a business. And he brought him in as a partner, and now it's his company. And it makes tremendous health supplements and things like that, awesome workout equipment, all of that kind of stuff. It's all great, and he kind of stands by it. Because if it was crappy, people would hold him accountable. Not some faceless corporation, but they would hold kind of Joe Rogan accountable. He kind of offers something for everyone. He offers something for the meatheads and the fighting crew, but he also offers something for intellectuals because he has on, Eric Weinstein and Jordan Peterson and Steven Pinker and people like that. So that is a bit of a rant, but a little bit about why Joe Rogan is such an influential, kind of important character and personality in 2020 America, and why this Spotify deal is a big deal, and it's going to be good for the company. I don't know if it'll be good for him or his audience or anything like that. That's yet to be seen, but that's my breakdown on Joe Rogan and his move to Spotify.